you and your wife moved to Alaska where you only knew one other person who knew absolutely nobody there. And you lived in a building for 2 years with no running water and no electricity with a baby and built a
Yeah.
multi-million-dollar business.
And we had 65 people working there. So it's not, I don't just have to support my family. I have to support 65 families, 66 counting mine, it's a lot.
Tell me about just an unusual job that you had where you looked at it and said, only in Alaska.
He said, well, I'm of the understanding that you can't drive there. And I said, well, I explained what we're doing. He said, well, what's that going to cost? And I said, I have no idea. I'll let you know when we're done. So in a lot of cases, we would be the only company trying to do some of those remote jobs because it's just, they're hard to figure out logistically.
What was that learning experience for you in building the infrastructure in the business?
What's your secret to success? And I would say,
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Violand's GPS podcast, where we sit down with thought leaders, business owners, people in the trades, and we talk through what it was like building the business and the stories and the highs and the lows and the lessons learned and what they would do differently and what they would do again. And really excited for a guest here for this one. This is Jeremy Hongslo. Jeremy is the founder and was the president of originally it was the carpet man, carpet cleaning, that moved into TCM Restoration up in Alaska. And he did not grow up there. So we're going to talk about how you end up becoming a carpet cleaner in Alaska and then building a multi-million-dollar business and the eventual sale. And of course, what he's doing now. And what he's doing now involves some islands and some sun and some boats and pretty much the opposite of Alaska. So it's a great story. Jeremy, thank you for being with us today.
hey, Jeff, good to talk to you.
Absolutely. So with this, what inspired you to move from Minnesota, not south, not warm,
Yeah.
but to Alaska? You said, how can I get colder? And
Yeah, we always tell people it wasn't cold enough or dark enough, so we wanted to go to Alaska. Now we had some friends that just kind of on a whim just said they were going to sell all their stuff and move to Alaska for a year. And Heather and I were young, married, didn't have any kids, and we just talked about it for a couple of days, and we said, "Hey, we're going with you."
wow.
And so we just sold most of what we had and packed up a trailer behind our Jeep and started driving. Drove up there, and we went a couple different places. We worked at a ski resort for a year in one town, and then we moved up to Fairbanks, and I worked as a gold miner for one season. That was kind of cool.
No
And
kidding.
then,
Did we strike gold?
yeah, well, I worked for a company. There was about a dozen of us that worked at this place, so we were finding gold all the time. But
You and Yukon Cornelius were roaming around up there together?
yeah, yeah. Anyway, so I did that for a while, but Fairbanks was cold and just too much. And so we moved down to Wasilla. I had lived in Minneapolis before, and I worked for a janitorial company, and I'd been a manager for this janitorial company. So I kind of knew that business a little bit, the cleaning business. And I had a friend who bought a used extractor for like $700, and he went and did one job. And he said, "Hey, man, it's a lot of work. I need some help. You want to be partners?" And I said, "All right." He said, "Well, give me $350 and you're in." So I
Low
bought in.
barrier of entry.
Yeah, yep. So I bought in, and we started doing carpet cleaning and janitorial work, and um, worked our butts off for a couple of years. We were working 80 or 100 hours a week and trying to put money back into the business. And it was a strain on his family, and so he needed to step out. And so I bought out this small little bit of equipment that we had, and kind of went from there. Uh, yeah,
Now,
that was in '98 when we started in '96, and I bought him out in '98.
so Heather, your wife, were you married at that time?
Yeah, we were married, and we. Uh, so when we moved to Wasilla, we bought this piece of property, and it, I built a 12 by 20 little cabin, and we didn't have any running water or electricity for 2 years. So because I just told her, just look, we need to put the money back into the business. Just be patient, you'll. And she was, and I to be honest with you, that's a huge reason we were able to be successful because she always had my back. She wasn't, you hear a lot of people that run into problems at home if they're working all the time, and she was 100% supportive. She wasn't involved in the business at the time because we were also starting our family. We had our first son while we were living at the cabin, and then one day, about a month before our second son was born, she said, "I've been very patient, but I want running water before this baby is born."
Did you tell her that was unreasonable?
No, she got running water before the baby
Okay.
was born.
All right.
Yeah,
So I can't imagine going to my wife and saying, one, let's move to Alaska. Two, let's live in Alaska with no running water or electricity. Three, let's start a family in Alaska with no running water or electricity. But I
yeah,
really couldn't imagine what that conversation would be like with my parents or my in laws. I mean,
yeah.
did
People
everybody
thought we
think
were
you were
nuts.
crazy?
Yeah, they thought we were nuts. There was,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right. You're a
yeah,
brave man.
yeah. I don't know how it worked out that way. It seemed like a good idea at the time. Um,
Did you know that you wanted when you got there and you got through everybody wants to go find treasure at some point in their life. So we did the gold mining phase and got that out of your system. But at that point, did you know you really wanted to own your own business, or was just the next thing to do or the next adventure?
um, once I jumped into it, I knew I wanted to do it. I wanted to be in control of my own destiny. I didn't want to have someone telling me when I needed to work or what I needed to do. So I knew that's what I wanted to do. But I didn't know if I didn't really want to be in the cleaning business. I just what I kind of fell into.
It's what you knew.
And yeah. So I just kind of went with it. I was always trying to think of what else could I do? What other business could I do? And jumping ahead a little bit, but I remember having a conversation when I first started working with Chuck. He kind of talked me through it, and he just sort of said, if you stick with this and you follow the process, this industry, you can be very successful. You could be in the top income earners in the country. And I I thought about it a little bit and I said, all right, well, maybe I'll stick with this for a while. Turned out to be 25 years.
Yeah, that's a little while. That says a lot about kind of the grit that you and Heather both had to have to start. I mean, you're starting pretty much at nothing. You're in a state where you don't know anybody. It's really cold and
Mhm.
you don't have electricity, you don't have water, and you said, "Boy, I'm going to make myself a multi-million-dollar business here."
I uh, I couldn't have really imagined. But the funny thing was, after we sold the business and we were on our sailboat down in the islands, I said to Heather, "Could you? I mean, can you even believe this? Could you even imagine this would happen?" She said, "Well, I hoped." Wow.
High hopes. That's our business plan right there.
I,
High
I,
hopes.
I guess so.
That's awesome. So, those early days, setting that business up and not having that infrastructure in place, not just from the water and the electricity and all of that, but not having a full understanding of how businesses work and how the financials work and what's your role other than, okay, I know how to clean a carpet, but how do I get other people to want me to do that for them? And how do I start bringing on employees? What was that learning experience for you in building the infrastructure early on in the business?
Well, early on, I think I had a little bit of sort of a chip on my shoulder kind of thing where I just said, I can outwork anybody. So that was my plan. And I worked a ton of hours. Not necessarily a good plan, but that's just what I did because I just felt like, okay, if nothing else, I can just work more than anybody. And we did we did a lot of janitorial early on. So we had janitorial contracts, and I was working at night doing that, and we had to start hiring people for that, which was, again, I only had like one semester of college. I don't understand how it all works. I remember going into my insurance agent's office and saying, "So I heard that if I have employees, I have to have work comp insurance. How's that work? How do I get that?" And they kind of talked me through it. Like, so I understand it.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, we did that for a while. We were doing carpet cleaning also, and we started to understand that being the cheapest guys out there, we thought we'll be the cheapest guys out there, we'll get all the work, and that was a really bad plan.
So your
Um,
initial plan was, I'm going to work as many hours as I possibly can and charge as little amount of money as I
yeah,
can.
yeah,
That was
that
the
was kind
plan.
of what it was.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
But we had hope. That's important.
yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
So we ran into some marketing programs and started to learn how to market the business while we were carpet cleaning, and that was huge because that sort of opened up my eyes to finding industry experts. I ran into some guys early on. I remember Rob Stewart, who was a Violand client also. And Rob introduced me to. I had met Chuck at Strategies for Success. Is that what John Don does?
Yep.
Strategies for Success? Yeah,
Yep.
I met Chuck there, and so I was aware of him. But Rob was a client, and so we were at a different marketing program. He started showing me some his financials and how it all worked, and started explaining how he worked with Viola, and that sort of piqued my interest, and so that kind of what got me into it.
So you're up and running. We got the janitorial, we got a little bit of carpet cleaning going, but we don't really have a name. You didn't grow up there. You're not from there. It's a brand new business. What were specific strategies that you put in place then to go land clients and knock on doors and get people to be convinced that you're the right place to go to give them their money?
Yeah, it's funny when you say knock on doors because in the first 2 years of the business, when I had a partner, that's actually what we were doing. We would we didn't have a van for our carpet cleaning. We had my Jeep, and we'd pile all the stuff in the back of that, and we would try to get business like commercial cleaning. We would drive around, and he would point out a place, and he said, "You got to go to that one." And so I'd have to go in and do a cold call, and then I'd point out a place, and he would have to do a cold call at that one. And it was brutal. It was brutal. We actually did get a couple of customers that we kept for years, some businesses, but it was really awful and a terrible strategy. Once we found one of these marketing programs, we couple of things. We learned how to market. We learned how to get the right message out there, and then we did yellow pages back in the day that were different than other companies. We did flyers, like a big pink flyer that would go in the newspapers as an insert. So we did newspaper inserts with, really attention grabbing headlines and strong offers and strong guarantees and things like that. And we really did start building the carpet cleaning business. We, ended up buying a couple of vans. I bought my first van and then bought another van and started hiring employees for that. And really started to see the profitability of the carpet cleaning side of the business, to a point where after a while, janitorial it was steady and predictable, but it was at night. And I had these crews running around at night and all kinds of craziness. And we eventually sold that part of the business to who was a current employee, and he kind of took it over. And we just turned to really focusing on carpet cleaning at that point. Carpet cleaning, air duct cleaning, tile and grout cleaning, those kind of things. And I'm sure a lot of guys that have been down this course have seen this. What would happen is people would call a carpet cleaner when they had water damage
Mhm.
because they had water on the carpet and they wanted you to come suck it up. And so that's kind of how we stumbled into doing water damage work.
Yeah, I think newspaper flyers are kind of like the original Google ads nowadays.
Yeah,
Same concept, just different location. But
right.
you're dating yourself a little bit with that one.
Yep, yep.
So when you're building this business early on, and you mentioned bringing on some employees, but at the same time you're trying to find your footing. Okay, am I a carpet cleaner? Am I a janitorial? Am I doing restoration? Am I doing this, that? Am I willing to go build a deck on the back of a guy's house if he's willing to pay me to do it? Talk through what were the early values that you were trying to build in this business, and how much did culture matter early on? Was it about trying to build a culture and a business, or was it just trying to sell enough, clean enough, restore enough that you can afford to fight again another day?
Pretty much that. Yeah, it was AFAB work, anything for a buck. Yeah, anything we could do to build the business and to make money. Trying to put most of that money back into the business and not pay myself very much. That was a big part of it, sort of a delayed gratification. And fortunately, Heather bought into that idea. We did, you know, expand our house and make it a little bit more like a normal house. And we had running water and electricity then by
Bought
then.
some lamps.
Yeah, yeah.
Good.
But it was still very much about reinvesting in the business and trying to grow it. I remember I started working with Chuck as a carpet cleaner mostly, and he helped me go in the direction I wanted to go. He didn't try to push me one way or the other, but he did mention things like there's a lot of opportunity in restoration work, and if you do want to do that, here's some things that you could do, that sort of thing. I think it was about 2008 that we saw the economy sort of faltering. There was a mess back then, and we thought, and we should probably really look into doing some restoration work because that seems like it's probably recession proof. People they're going to have insurance. They're going to have, if they own their home, they're going to have insurance. If they have insurance, there's a way to pay for it, and people are still going to have floods and fires.
Mm.
And so we made an active decision to try to grow more into doing restoration work. And that's really when that started to take off.
At what point did Heather, and you have a son, you have a daughter. At what point did the kids? What point did the wife become more heavily involved in the business?
So yeah, I have two sons and a daughter.
Two sons. Sorry about that.
Um, my daughter only worked there a couple of times. She made it very clear. She's the youngest. She made it very clear she wanted no part of being in the business. Uh, but she, but she was there for all the conversations at the dinner table, and she took all those lessons, business lessons, I think, to heart. Um, and she started her own company. And she does wedding videography. So all three of the kids now have their own businesses. I guess Tanner started. Geez, I've got pictures of him out in the shop sweeping the floors when he was 10 years old or something like that, and then Hunter probably around the same age. They started cleaning rugs in the rug pit, area rugs in the rug pit when they were 13, 14, I'm sure. I don't remember their exact ages. They were washing trucks and, working around the shop after school early on. Heather was, busy taking care of the kids and running family for the longest time. She didn't come to the office. She didn't know who worked there. She probably didn't even have a key to the building. She just wasn't involved in that. Our deal was you take care of the family and I'll provide, and I'll just make sure that we've got enough money to make a living. She said, great, because she wanted to be a mom, which she's really good at. I can remember the first job she joined us on because it was a fire job and we were really new to fires. And we just needed help and we were overwhelmed. And I said, can you come in and help? And she sort of just got thrown into it.
Hmm.
And she was out doing contents, had no idea. As a company, we had no idea what we were doing. She just jumped in and started helping. And after a little while, she took over the marketing and we just really started to grow.
That's the quintessential family business, though. I mean, everybody's got to jump in when you need it because that business is another child. It's an extension of the family, and everybody's got to jump in and do their part, whether they want to or not, at different times. And I will definitely say that having two sons named Hunter and Tanner come across as very Alaska to me. So it feels like you ingrained yourself into Alaska pretty quickly in the process.
Yeah. Yeah. The boys pretty much always worked there. And I always made it really clear to them that they weren't expected to. They didn't have to. They would say, I remember when they were really young, they would say, "Oh, Dad, can I come work for you?" And I said, "Well, you can come work with me." And yeah, they eventually Tanner started running the carpet cleaning part of the company when he was very young, but he was the manager of it, and he did a really great job. And then and Hunter was working doing carpet cleaning and helping out with mitigation work while he was still in high school. And then later on, and I don't remember what year this was, but we had different. Heather had different salespeople working for her doing outside sales, and they would come and go, and some of them did a good job for us, and we actually had one that was pretty good, but he left us, and it's at a point where we were really starting to grow, and we had a sales route that really needed attention, and we had been through this process of hiring salespeople, which is difficult. They're a different type of person to hire. Um,
I'm not going to argue that point. Yeah, I get it.
Well, it really is, and it's there has to be a lot of accountability
Mhm.
there, and that was that was a frustration for Heather because she holding people accountable. She didn't enjoy that part of the work, but she was very good at the marketing. And we thought about it, and we decided to ask Tanner to do the outside sales. He was very young. He was, I don't know, maybe he was 21. I'm not sure. And we thought, geez, can he pull that off? It's and he liked running the carpet cleaning part of the business, but um, he said, okay, I'll do it. He didn't really want to, but he said, I'll do it.
Mhm.
And long story short, he was our most successful salesperson we ever had. He did a fantastic job. By the time he left after we sold the company, he was still working there. They couldn't keep up with. He could outsell what they could do, which was frustrating for him because as a salesperson, you want to be able to sell as much as you can. But
Yeah.
did a fantastic job. Hunter ended up running we ended up splitting mold out of the mitigation side of the business, where it's just he did mold and radon. He ran that part of the company very successfully. Yeah. So and Heather did ran the marketing part of the company.
Violand Management and the GPS podcast is proud to support the Restoration Industry Association and Know How as they launch the 2025 Cost of Doing Business Survey, a vital benchmarking tool for the industry. This is your chance to anonymously contribute real data that will guide better business decisions, validate overhead and margin models, and give restoration leaders tools to plan for growth. It takes about an hour. It's confidential, and your results are never shared. Only those that participate get access to the final results. This survey helps define fair pricing and business benchmarks across the industry. Get started at costofrestoration.com. Let's raise the bar together. I think when you get back to the managing the sales reps, I think you bring up something that's really interesting right there, because you pay a sales rep a decent amount of money to go out and build relationships. Go build your relationships. So they go out there and they do that, and they start bringing you in some money, and you get accustomed to the work that's coming in from the relationships that they have built that are their relationships, and then they leave and they take those relationships with them out the door. As an owner of a business, how did you find ways of making certain that when that rep left, the relationships didn't go with the rep, but they stayed in house with TCM?
We probably have an advantage in that Alaska is a smaller market, and that I don't think we ever had a situation where we had a sales rep leave and go to another company, another competitor. And so we didn't have that situation. And so I think part of the idea is that uh, we really tried as much as we could to hold our sales reps accountable to documenting everything so that we know what their relationship was with a certain agent or with a certain referral partner, whether it was a plumber or property manager or whoever. So we could go through the notes and find out, okay, here's what's going on here. We'd have a new sales rep get out there as quick as possible and meet them and talk to them about the company and that
So
sort of
it was
thing.
that documentation piece was kind of key there.
I think that made a big difference. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not ideal. What's ideal is if you're having a salesperson leave on good terms and they take the new person on their route with them and introduce them to everybody. That's ideal.
Right.
They can transfer that relationship sort of. And also, I think that's the messaging. If the messaging isn't, when you train your salesperson that it's not all about you, don't they? Sure, they have to like you as a salesperson, but that's not the point. The point is that you want them to like the company and all the things about the company that they should care about, so that when the new person steps in, they're bringing that same message.
What were some of the ways that you had the successful salesperson and they left, then your son took over that role? And you mentioned, hey, Heather especially doesn't like holding people accountable, and she's managing the team. And you probably the same thing. It can get a little accountability in the workplace is very, very challenging because you don't want to make anybody upset. You don't want them to leave, but they've got to do their job, and you want to walk a fine line there. How do you manage a salesperson where you still give them the autonomy that they need, the flexibility that they need, but you have an idea of what's going on, and keeping them in line without falling off the rails?
Results, they have to show results. And yeah, they do need to have some old fashioned accountability. Um, I want to see you in the office in the morning. I want to see you back in the office in the afternoon at the end of the day. You know, I, I don't need to hear that, well, I've got stops out here and out there, and it doesn't make sense for me to drive all the way back there. No, I want to see that you're still working at the end of the day. Do we need to have sales meetings on Friday at 3 p.m.?
That's when I'm at the golf course, Jeremy. I don't want to have my sales meeting then.
Right. Well, that's might be what we have to do if we're not seeing the results. Because so good people, you don't need to know where they are every minute of every day, but you've got to see results, and you've got to set up a structure where um, Tim had an analogy that he would use. He would say, "You let them know where the fences are on the ranch. It's a big ranch, but you got to stay inside the fences, and you got to let them know where those boundaries are."
Did you once a rep? You talked about having two good reps, and you probably had a couple that weren't as good, and maybe you had more than two. But for this discussion,
Sure.
did you find that you would manage when a rep proved that they were worth something? Did you manage them differently at that point, or was the system in place where we had to do it a specific way?
Um, I think we did give some of them more flexibility. If we knew they were getting results and they were out there being proactive and really getting after it, we sort of we didn't push as hard for okay, I guess I don't need to see you in the office at the end of the day on Friday. Just make sure you're out there doing your job. I mean, we had way back before we were even doing restoration work, we had a sales rep for carpet cleaning, and I was just talking to the boys about this the other day because they're both still getting business from what the sales rep did probably 20 years ago. I was doing a job interview with somebody who had worked for a competitor of mine, and they mentioned a job that they had been working on. They said, "Yeah, we go up to it's a remote location. It's a couple hundred miles away from where we are. There's some lodges." And they said, "Yeah, I go up there every year for about, for working for this competitor for 2 weeks. Every year we do this job." And I thought, man, this got to be a pretty big job. And so I told this sales rep, I said, "Okay, here's the town you're going to. Here's what I think the customer is. Go up there and see if you can sell something." That's all I gave him. And he came back with the biggest sale that I had ever seen in our business, which wasn't, not huge by today's standards, but back then for us, it's huge. And that was all the guidance I had given this guy. He
Hmm.
drove a couple hundred miles away and sold it. And it's pretty impressive, And yeah, to this day, I don't, I'm not in the business anymore, but both of my boys are still getting work from these customers.
When you'd have your sales manager meetings with them at 3 o'clock on a Friday or whenever you were going to have it with them, what were some of the key the KPIs, or what were some of the key things that you took a look at to judge how well are you performing versus how well do you think you're just going out and building relationships and I'm not paying you for that, I'm paying you for sales?
Well, we want to look at some really basic stuff like the number of stops that they made. You've got to make the stop. You got to go see the people. So that's the most basic thing of anything. How many meetings did you have? Actual meetings. How many substantial discussions did you have? Real deep discussions. Well, we used to do back before they changed the law in Alaska. We used to do lunch and learns, and we were allowed for insurance agents. We were allowed to do those ourselves, and then the agents would get credits for continuing education.
Sure.
And they changed the law that we couldn't do that anymore, but we started hiring somebody to put on one of those classes, so that we would go out. And so how many people can you get to show up at the class? How many invitations did you get? How many RSVPs did we get for that lunch and learn? Things like that.
Did you enjoy managing the sales team or the operations team more?
Operations.
How
Yeah,
come?
definitely operations.
How come?
Um, I didn't have a problem holding people accountable. I felt, that's the deal, right? This is the job. You agree to do the job. I don't have a hard time at all saying, show me what you can do. Show me the results of what you said you were going to do this week. I didn't have a problem holding people accountable.
Easier to do on the operation side
Absolutely.
because you
Yeah.
could see the work that was getting done, or was it just more natural for you because you had done the work yourself?
Um, Well, I think it's easier to quantify. Operations work is easier to quantify if the work is done. How far along is the project? I mean, is there drywall in the place or not? Is it, whereas a relationship, trying to describe it first on the sales side, trying to describe how deep is the relationship with that customer? Are they about to give us their first referral, or are they just pretending? That that's hard to measure. Whereas on the operations side, it's very clear. Did we finish the mitigation job? Yes. Is the customer happy? Yes. Have we been paid? Yes. Okay, we did our job. That's easier.
I want to talk a little bit about in Alaska, obviously, can be a crazy environment. So, how did that environment and the climate sometimes impact operations in the business?
Well, definitely the it's seasonal. I mean, you're going to have a lot of water damages in the winter. That's typically when we would see them. I mean, we would get what we would call a house sickle sometimes, where you just see water running out the side of the house and just frozen on the sides. It's just a huge block of ice, crazy stuff like that. We had jobs where there's a town close to here or there's a lake called Big Lake, and there's islands, out on the lake, and people build cabins out there. And in the summertime, they take boats there. And in the wintertime, they plow ice roads out to them. We had, you know, uh, jobs out. They have to take an ice road out to the project and drive across the lake. Which people in Minnesota might be used to something like that, but it's a little different.
Well, let's jump into that. Tell some stories here, because that's really what this podcast is about. Is the stories that go with owning businesses and the trades, and the ups and the downs and the lessons learned along the way. So tell me about a job, just an unusual job that you had, where you looked at it and said, only in Alaska, only in Alaska can I be doing this.
Yeah, I remember one time we had this couple. It was an older couple. You could tell talking to them on the phone, called, and they had water damage, and it was down in their crawl space. And they live in outside of Cordova, which there's no Cordova's off the road system. It's out by Prince William Sound. It's on Prince William Sound, but you can't drive there. You can take a boat there. You can fly there. And 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 so the customer called, and it was a weird job. So the office put me on the phone with them, and I started talking to the lady, and she said, "Well, we've got there's water down in our crawl space, but my husband hasn't been down there yet. We can't tell how much, but it was in their kitchen. I think our kitchen flooded." And so I talked them through the pre-qualification questions, and they were insured. They had one of the major insurance companies, which surprised me that they would have that. So I called to confirm with their agent that they were insured, and they were. So and she said, "Well, I talked to an adjuster on the phone, and he said that they could send me a check for I think it was $4,000 or something like that based on their." And I said, "Well, how did he decide that?" She said, "Well, I just told them what was wrong in the house." And so that doesn't sound right. I think we need to send somebody over there to take a look for you. And she said, "Well, should I have my husband go in the crawl space?" And he was like 70 something years old. And I said, "No, I don't think so. It could be unsafe."
No, that seems like that could get a little bit more risque.
Yeah. So we talked it through, and we had a couple of guys take one of the trucks and a trailer. And so to get there, they've got to drive about 2 hours to Whittier, where there's a ferry. And they to get to Whittier, you got to drive through a tunnel. And so they get there, they put the truck and the trailer on the ferry, and then have to take the ferry to Cordova, which is another, I don't know, 6 or 8 hour ferry ride. I'm not sure. It's a multiple day process. Anyway, they're on their way
Wait,
there,
you're doing
and
all this for a $4,000 crawl space job?
well, we knew it was more than that.
Okay, okay.
So that
Just want to
so
clarify right there.
I get a call from the adjuster, and or I called the adjuster, and he said, "Well, I've already talked to the customer about this. They're gonna take a settlement." I said, "No, they need." I said, "Look, they've got water in the crawl space. This guy is 70 years old. He can't go down there and do it. This sounds like it's much bigger than that." And so we're going there to look at it. And uh, "Well, I'm of the understanding that you can't drive there." And I said, "Well," I explained what we're doing. He said, "Well, what's that going to cost?" And I said, "I have no idea. I'll let you know when we're done." And he just went silent. He didn't know what to say. And it was about a $70,000 job by the time all the reconstruction was done, and it was a big job.
Jeez.
And we took care of them, and they were happy. But it was, um, that was an outlier. But we had, so Alaska's a pretty
Well,
big state.
how did you get all the material and everything out there? How did you have your employees out there for days
Oh
on
well,
end working on this?
so the mitigation crew went, did all the mitigation work, came back. They had scoped it out, took as many pictures as they could. We wrote a repair estimate, and then the repairs guys went with all the materials for, I think they were out there for a few weeks working on the project and doing all the rebuild and everything. So
What, what was that production meeting like where you sat down with your team and went, oh, hey, I'm sending you to the middle of nowhere surrounded by grizzly bears.
yeah,
And, you can go there for 3 weeks and good
yeah.
luck.
The guys liked doing out of town work most of the time. There's some of the places they didn't like. There was a, so we had a job. We were doing a series of jobs for the North Slope Borough, which the North Slope of Alaska is about, I don't know, probably 800 miles north of where we are. And again, you can only drive to one spot, but there's no, that's just Prudhoe Bay where the pipeline is. The rest of it, you've got to fly in. We were doing some work for the North Slope Borough, and they had a property up there that had some damage, and I think it was in Atkinsuk or something like that. And so we had to charter a plane from Anchorage, load materials into the plane, and we can't send the guys. The cargo plane wouldn't haul guys at the same time. So we'd have the plane fly up there. I think there was $12,000 just for the plane for the flight, and then materials fly it up there. When they get there, there's an airstrip, but there's no real airport per se, and so the pilot just shoves all the materials out onto the side of the airstrip, and then we had the guys fly in a couple of days later. Well, by the time they get there, the people in the village have stolen half of the materials, and and and, and the truck that somebody said that we could rent for $150 a day isn't running. And so there was some other contractor working on I don't know, some civil project that had a front end loader. And they had to talk that guy into helping them load the materials in the front end loader and bring it to the job site. And we had to fly in another load of materials for everything that got stolen. So we learned in the future, all those remote projects, we fly the guys in first so that they can be on the ground when the materials arrive and they can
Security.
secure everything. So yeah, we had projects all over in remote villages. It was, we had one down in Petersburg in southeast Alaska, which is down well, southeast, and it's on the coast. And it was an old cannery that had been turned into a house, and it was out on pilings over the water on the edge of it. And so they
Nice.
had to install the windows at low tide so they could go out and put ladders up out there and get windows installed. So we had all kinds of cool stuff like that.
Is there an Exactimate code for front end loader transportation? And how do you write, like, seriously, how do you write some of these estimates where it's just that goofy? Is this a lot of time and material, or are you just
Yeah, time and materials. We had we responded to a flooded school out in Southwest Alaska. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's probably not important, but it was a very big project, and we had guys out there for weeks, just doing the mitigation side of it, not doing any repairs. And we submitted our estimate, and this guy, they sent it to some consultant down in Seattle to review the bill, and it was like $170,000, something like that. It's a pretty good sized project.
Mhm.
And he came back with some scathing review of our of our estimate and tried to knock it down to like 120,000. And I just laid into him and I said, "Show me the Exactmate code for it," because he started using all the Exactmate codes.
Mhm.
And I said, "Show me the Exactmate code for an air mover rental in wherever it was, Alaska."
Mhm.
And just kind of ran through all the different things. And in the end, I conceded that I had used the wrong code for a certain filter, and we dropped our bill by like $200, and we got paid. We got paid in
I think I'll
full.
take that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, how often do the adjusters push back on some because of just the logistics of what you're trying to do, and they push back on it, and you just reply back with one word, Alaska, and see if you
Yeah.
can fire that through.
For the most part, okay, everything that we did on the road system in a normal environment, we
Mhm.
had the same interactions that everybody else in the industry has. We build good relationships, be reasonably trustworthy, do the right thing. And there's always a battle of some kind. We had the
Yeah.
normal thing that everyone else has.
Yep.
For the remote work or for any of these oddball jobs, as long as we document the job well, we're being sincere, we're actually willing to go do the job and able to do the job. There's not too many companies that can figure that out, you know? So in a lot of cases, we would be the only company trying to do some of those remote jobs because it's just, they're hard to figure out logistically.
Scarcity is a good job plan, or
Yeah.
a good business plan to have right there. So thank you for taking the time to listen to Violand's GPS podcast. I hope you're discovering valuable insights and practical wisdom to guide you on your journey. The 2025 Violand Executive Summit will take place on June 23rd and 24th in Canton, Ohio. This event features 12 advanced business courses to choose from, covering topics such as performance management, artificial intelligence, digital marketing, results driven selling, business financials, and much more, combining collegiate and real world education from world class instructors, all customized to small businesses in the trades. It's also a fantastic opportunity to network with inspiring professionals like those featured on the GPS podcast. Don't miss out. Register today at violand.com or use the links provided on the screen or in the description. Now, let's get back to our show. So, how much work were you doing that was commercial?
Oh, quite a bit. I mean, I don't remember as a percentage. It was probably maybe 25% of our business in restoration work.
Were there any certain strategies you were using to be able to land the commercial work or to be able to complete the commercial work and be a little more profitable?
Well, I think looking for the more complicated the job and the more compliance requirements
Mhm.
that there were, whether it be for a government entity or for, uh, if they wanted all kinds of compliance work, they wanted you to submit a job site safety plan. They wanted you to submit. They wanted to do. Maybe it was a federal or a state job. It would be a Davis Bacon job, a certified payroll job. There's a lot of companies that just go, I don't even know how to deal with that. So if it required a stack of paperwork to do the job, that was a good job for us to bid on because we had a fantastic admin team. We had ladies in the office that were very good at doing all of those things,
Yeah.
and I think other companies just didn't want to deal with it. So that we would look for that.
Let's go there for a second because there's all sorts of training that's out there for your technicians, for your project managers, for your estimators, for the owner of the business. There's very little out there for the admin, but it's the admin is kind of the glue that makes certain that operations runs efficiently and the salesperson doesn't disappear and the everything in the office gets handled and really is the right hand person for the owner most of the time. Talk about how do you build an administrative team that allows all of your crazy ideas to look almost seamless when deep down inside they're not, but the people in the office are making you look good.
I mean, if I'm being honest, I can't say I got lucky.
Mm.
I hired a person who we had a fantastic office manager for years, way back in the day, and she left us on good terms. She moved out of state for a while, um, but we were much smaller back then. Then I went through a series of 4 office managers in 2 years, and they all had one thing in common: they hated my guts. They just hated me. It
Maybe
was
in the
it,
interview process, ask that question before we go any further. Do you hate me?
yeah.
And see if
It
we
was
can get that out in the open early on.
it was awful. Uh, it was a bad 2 years. Um, and
Well, you were
then
going
I
through a
hired,
phase, it sounds like.
yeah, and then I managed to hire somebody who was just an incredible person, and she really built our admin team.
Mm.
Um, and so then my role in that was to support her and to give her whatever resources she needed to grow herself as an individual and as a professional, and help her develop the team, help her come up with structure. We came up with this. We had our what we called IPCs, inside project coordinators, where we would have that. And I think when we sold, we had 4 IPCs, and then our manager, our office manager, oversaw them. She eventually became our controller, and we had a separate office manager for, but it's not important. The role of the IPC was really incredible, though. They would take the incoming phone call and from mitigation phase, from the point the customer called to say, my house is flooded. What do I do? They had a whole process that they led them through. They'd initiate the mitigation team to go do the work. They followed that job all the way through to the completion of mitigation, working with the adjuster to collect the money once the estimator had submitted all the estimates and all that sort of thing. Um, to when it would turn over to the construction side, they continued to work with that customer when it went to our project manager for the construction side. They they also had files for every mortgage company out there that we could think of, with all the requirements that those mortgage companies had to release money. So we would have a limited power of attorney, so that our IPC could work with the customer's mortgage company to get the funds released. So they were instrumental of sticking with that customer all the way through to the certificate of completion was signed, the last money was collected, and the file was closed and put away. Uh, that was that their role in the company was huge.
So building a strong administrative team that didn't hate you was not something that you were naturally good at. So you hired somebody who could do that, and then your role became to support that person and give them everything they need.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's part of the business planning process too, is to go to each division in the company and basically say, what do you need to be successful? What tools do you need, whether it be intellectual tools or actual physical tools? What do you need to be successful? What kind of support do you need?
A lot of times when owners start the business, they've got their hands in everything because they have to. And then they just get accustomed to that, in which case you didn't start a company, you bought yourself a job and you
Mhm.
become chained to that company, and then you're worried that nobody else can do it as well as you can. And then when you get to the point where you start hiring better employees, and then you start hiring managers, and your role goes from doer to managing employees to managing managers, a lot of people struggle with that. But it seems like what you're describing right there, of saying, hey, I don't need to do all of this anymore because I wasn't the greatest at all of it, but I need to support these people. That sounds easy. I mean, that sounds like an easier way to go, but so many business owners struggle with that. I mean, what kind of advice do you have as far as letting go of the trapeze to get to the next one, to advance yourself, to advance your business when it comes to managing the employees?
You know, uh, for about a 10-year period, I coached football.
Hmm?
I coached youth football all the way up through into high school for a while, and there were so many similarities. You look for what people's strengths are, and you try to help them be better at what they do, and that was what was rewarding to me, is working with everybody and trying to build this team and build this process, and and be honest, trying to make a buck too. You know what I mean? Trying to make a living. I have to say that uh, it is difficult to let go. Well, no, let me put it a different way. It's difficult to watch people who are representing your company and your name go out there and make mistakes,
Yeah.
embarrassing mistakes.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, it's sometimes it's an honest mistake. I mean, my son Hunter was running the mold crew, and they went in to demo a bathroom, and they demoed the wrong bathroom.
I hope you bring that up at every family Christmas, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. And so, I mean, so something like that. It's whoops. Yep, we made a mistake. I guess you get two bathrooms remodeled
You
now.
can't hide that one.
Yeah, but other
What do you
times,
mean bathroom? There was never a bathroom there.
it was really tough because we had project managers over the years who, you know, didn't do the right thing sometimes. We thought
Hmm?
they were doing the right thing. You meet with them, they tell you where the project's at, they tell you what's happening, they tell you what the problems are from their perspective, and then I would stand behind them. I'd back them up, only to find out 6 months later they were lying. It didn't go the way they said it went, and we didn't do a good job as a company. That's hard. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a really hard thing to deal with. And to be honest, some of that went into my reasons for wanting to get out of the business in the end, is I could only deal with I could only take so much of that.
Well, let's go there. So you had the business for what, 20 years?
A total of 25 years.
25 years. So at that point, you said you have two sons and you have a daughter, but you have one more kid. You have TCM. You
Yeah.
you birthed this thing, you raised this thing, and it's become a part of you. And when people in town would think of you, they would think of TCM. And
Yeah.
so selling that's not an easy choice. So what ultimately led you down that path?
I really was, as you described, I was really invested in that business, and when we grew to a point where it just felt like it was much bigger than me, my competency level I did not feel like I was as competent as I needed to be to run a company that size. It was just, you know, I would have to put on a good show of knowing.
Did you feel like you didn't deserve it at that point?
I don't know. I don't know.
You and your wife moved to Alaska where you only knew one other person who knew absolutely nobody there. And you lived in a building for 2 years with no running water and no electricity in Alaska with a baby and built a
Yeah.
multi-million-dollar business. So if you didn't deserve this, who did? I mean, that's got to be
Yeah.
really weird in your head to go, well, I
Well,
remember the days back then.
yeah. I don't know if it was that I didn't deserve it, but I wasn't competent to, and I shouldn't say that. I just questioned. Um, it was a lot. It was a lot to keep up with, and we had 65 people working there. So it's not, I don't just have to support my family. I have to support 65 families, 66 counting mine, it's a lot. Um, you got to keep feeding that beast new work, that you got to keep, that's a lot of work to keep producing, and you've got to keep growing. You can't stop growing, or I can't imagine running a business not growing. So it was just a lot, and there was a lot of pressure personally, and but fortunately, the company was at its pinnacle. It was running, everything was dialed in tight. It was very good. I mean, we had a fantastic team. We had the right person in all of the key positions in the company, and it was firing on all cylinders, just going gangbusters, just great, which is also a great time to sell your business. And after working with Violand for so many years, we had job descriptions in place for everybody. We had all of our employment documentation was pretty much perfect. Um, we had procedures written for all kinds of different things in the company. I mean, it was just really, really dialed in tight. And anyway, I had asked Tim to, and over the years, we had companies reaching out to us to see if we were interested in selling. And I said, no, 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 we're not interested. And then it happened a few more times. And one time it was someone who was actually was in town, more or less, and wanted to go have lunch. And so I didn't want anyone on the leadership team to get freaked out or hear a rumor or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yep.
And so I just said, hey, by the way, I'm going to lunch with this guy. He wants to know if I'll sell the business to him. I'm not selling the business to him. So I just want you to know that in case, and all of them, they didn't react the way I thought they would. They go, okay, let's, they didn't take it in a bad way. It's almost like they expected something like that.
Was it something like they thought that you deserved at the end to be able to sell the business and to be able to get the financial security for you and your family at that point, that you
I,
had
I
earned
think
that?
so. Yeah, I think so.
Hmm,
And
that's pretty cool. That
yeah,
says something about the people working for you, that they're putting the needs of you, because it is scary as an employee of a company that gets bought, and but for them to still be happy for you says a lot about the culture and the people you hired.
we had great people that, you know, people sometimes ask me, do you ever miss it? And I said, well, I don't miss my customers. but I really miss our employees. I miss our team. I miss working with them. They're great people. Anyway, so around that time, I had asked Tim to do a kind of a rudimentary evaluation of the business for me, and I just kind of it was like, wow, really? Like I had no idea. And again, there were other companies, people that would reach out periodically. I'd get a letter or an email or a phone call from someone interested. And um, anyway, I just reached a point at a certain point that I thought, I think it might be time. And I talked to Heather about it. And as always, she's just been always 100% supportive of whatever I wanted to do,
Mhm,
just
mhm.
fully supportive. And which I can't emphasize that enough. It's a big deal if you're trying to run a business to have, if you have unconditional support from your spouse. I mean, it's a big deal. Anyway, so I talked to her, and then I had two sons in the business, and sort of what's always sort of assumed is that one or both of them will take over the business someday, right? Well, oh, another side note, we had a friend in the industry that I went to high school with in another state who had taken over his dad's business and was now running. His dad had retired,
Mhm.
and we were talking with them one day, and he said something about, I don't know if I could retire. I don't know what I would do. And his wife said, well, you can't retire anyway. We're not done paying off your dad. And I thought, oh man, so his kid has to fund his dad's retirement. And so Heather and I talked about it. We're like, we would never want our boys to be in that situation where they're making payments for our
Wow.
retirement. Like
Yeah.
that's
I haven't heard that one before. That's yeah. Whew.
yeah. And so I started looking at how to, before we thought of selling, started looking at transition plans and how that would work. And in every situation, it's just, it didn't feel right to me. When I was ready to sell, I went to each of the boys and said, here's what I'm thinking about doing. And I felt horrible because I felt like it was going to be a kick in the gut to them.
Mhm.
And both of them almost immediately said, Dad, you got to do it. Take the money.
Yeah.
You guys can go retire. And I don't remember which one of them said it. They said, you already taught us how to make money. We'll be fine. We'll go start our own businesses.
Mhm.
And which they've done, and they're doing very well with them.
It's almost like you gave them permission to go out and become their own people.
Yeah, it turned out to be, which I got to admit, it wasn't like I had this master plan to do that, and it was all about doing that for them at all.
Right.
But that's how it turned out. So yeah, both of them just said, do it. And yeah, so that we started going down that road.
So you sell the business, obviously complicated process, and it can be a nightmare. But in your case, seems like you did pretty good, got out of it. What are you doing now?
Well, let me before we skip over selling the business part.
Yeah.
I went to Tim
Okay.
Hall. Tim is one of my closest confidants. That he's Tim was there for me through a lot of stuff, and he led me through the whole process of selling the business. He gave me options of going different directions, using different people to sell. Tim was by my side that whole time, which was the most intense. I think 7 months. The process of selling, most intense 7 months that I've ever been through. Unbelievable. I remember the one day when he was about to put me, send me into this meeting. I'm going in on my own on the phone with our new buyers, and he said, "Well, good luck. You're about to make the biggest sale in your life."
Good luck. Everybody's counting on you.
Yeah, and he helped me to sell for really far more than I would have ever thought possible. And
Yeah.
I can't say enough about how that went down right to the end. It was great. Tim was he was awesome.
Yeah, I remember when the deal was done, and obviously not the specifics of it or anything like that, but when the deal was done, and him coming to a staff meeting and just the joy that he had for you and your team after being a part of your group for so long, and how proud he was of what you guys had accomplished. And that says a lot about when you get people to be part of the journey that you trust, and they want to be part of it, and they want to be a part of what you're doing. It goes a long way in support and help. And it was really cool what you guys accomplished.
Well, and the one of the things, multiple people on the leadership team were, one of their biggest disappointments was that the company that bought TCM chose to not continue working with Violand.
Yeah, they fired us.
And and they were all so disappointed that they weren't going to be able to work with Violand anymore. They just, I mean, there was a bond there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well,
So
it happens. Almost all of our, we've had a lot of clients sell since COVID, and almost every time we get fired. Sometimes they try to fire us even before the deal's over with, before the sale is completed. I'm like, hold on a sec, hold on. So we're always thrilled to death for our clients, but then we're like, that was like one of our best clients.
yeah, yeah.
Oh well, but that's part of it. Again, it's about building businesses and supporting families and reaching dreams. And you could never have imagined when you packed up the Jeep and drove to Alaska that you were going to build what you built.
Yeah. When I first started working with Chuck, he wanted to know what are your goals? Let's talk through your whole, when do you want to retire? And I told him, Chuck, I want to retire when I'm 50. And he's like, well, it's like, when you're 50, it's like, what are you gonna do? You can't sit on a beach forever. You got to do something. And so when we finally sold, I remember talking to Chuck, and I said, Chuck, I told you 20 years ago that I want to retire by the time I'm 50. I'm 52. I'm disappointed in you, Chuck.
That's you didn't live up to your end of the bargain.
Yeah.
Well, so let's do that. Tell me about this beach. Tell me about what you're doing now.
Yeah. So we probably 14, 15 years ago, we Heather and I went and took a class up here in Alaska on. We learned to sail and got certified in sailing. And so we started taking the family down to the British Virgin Islands once a year, and we'd charter a sailboat. We'd rent a sailboat, and we'd go sail around for a week. And it's a great family vacation. And I like learning to sail, and so that's what we did. And Heather and I always thought, man, wouldn't it be cool if we could just do this all the time in the winter? Because we kind of want to. We love Alaska, but we don't want to be here so much in January and February anymore. It's dark, it's
Makes
cold.
sense. Yep.
Yeah,
I feel that way about Ohio, so I can't imagine Alaska.
yeah. We bought a catamaran sailboat. It stays down in the Virgin Islands, and we go down and we spend about 100 days a year on it. This year we sailed around the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, and then to St. Martin, and then to St. Bart's, and then down to St. Kitts and Nevis, and then weather kind of got to us. We couldn't go any further than that this year, and we ended up having to work our way back. But it's a blast. Friends and family come down to visit. We go take them sailing, and that's what we do in the winter.
Well, Tim has always said that among all of the business we've ever worked with, that you and your team, what set you guys apart was discipline and consistency. You showed up every single day. There was a job to do. You did your job day after day after day, and it wasn't always glamorous, but it was always done.
Yeah.
What that part of being disciplined, of being consistent, of not chasing all of the shiny objects and getting distracted, now has allowed you to have the ultimate shiny object, a big boat down in the Bahamas. So talk a little bit about the importance of consistency.
Yeah. Uh, so we're not in the Bahamas though. We're in the
Well,
Virgin Islands. Virgin
I haven't
Islands is
been
about
down there. I know there's a whole bunch of islands. I know there's a big ocean, but
so
I'm
the
in
Virgin
Ohio.
Islands. Yeah, the Virgin Islands is about 1,000 miles south of the Bahamas. But yeah.
I'll take your word for it.
So um, you mentioned shiny objects. I chased a lot of those in the business. I'll have to be honest. But we did try to be consistent and disciplined. I used to be in a BNI chapter for years, and you'd always have to answer this question: What's your secret to success? And I would say, show up on time, do what you say you're going to do, and say please and thank you. If you do that, you're ahead of 90% of your competition. Just show up and then do what you said you were going to do. for us, the way to stay consistent and disciplined was always going back to the business plan constantly. I mean, throughout the year, we're always looking at the business plan and trying to hold each other accountable for what we said we were going to do. Your team is part of building that plan. You include them in that. They're a part of it. They help agree to what they want the goals to be, what they think they can get done, and what tasks they say that they're going to do. And we always, all of us, would fall short of what we said we were going to do. We could never do everything we said we were going to do, but we would try, and we would try to hold each other accountable to it. So yeah, that was the key.
Well, Jeremy, I greatly appreciate your time, your story. It's incredible. Not a lot of people would have the courage, I think, to do what you did, and then the fortitude to stick it out and then build what you build. And now you're enjoying the fruits of the labor, and you and the family get to go sailing in some beautiful areas of the world that, again, haven't been to. But, I'm not 50 yet. I'm getting close. So I got 3 more years to try and get down there. But thank you for your time, and I'll leave it to you if there's any advice that you want to give anybody who's trying to manage or run a business in the trades and helping them get to where you got to.
Well, I can't thank the whole team at Violand enough. I mean, I just what a great group of people. What a fantastic. Again, because I started working with Chuck when it was just Chuck. I remember one day when he said, I had met Scott Tackett at one of the events. He was a speaker. He said, "What do you think of Scott? I'm thinking about hiring him. He's a great guy." Um, so yeah, I mean, everything that Violand did for us, that's how we built our business. Is I just followed the blueprint that they laid out for us, and I can't thank all of you enough. It's been fantastic.
Well, thank you, Jeremy, and we hope you enjoy listening to this episode. Please like, subscribe, and hit all the buttons. Thank you very much, and Jeremy, thank you.
We'll see you, Jeff.